Since 1947, when Israel declared independence from England, it has fought very hard to back that declaration up. Many of its neighbors, including terrorist organizations, such as the Iranian-backed Hamas, have been fighting to knock that declaration down and wipe the state clean of all of its Jewish inhabitants. This is also true for many left-leaning political groups and news agencies, such as the CBC here in Canada. Even if it is not explicitly stated, the message was very clear in May of 2021 when the State of Israel had defended itself against malicious rocket attacks from Hamas. The reporting was explicitly one-sided, the Palestinian side, especially when the CBC had covered protests of thousands of people who had shown up to speak out against Israel. Although we here at the Flow of Discourse podcast fully believe and support your right to protest, we do not believe the CBC should be condemning lockdown protests and activists, and meanwhile giving free passes to whatever causes it deems worthy. This media bias has been pretty consistent for about as long as I can remember. On top of Israel's complicated geopolitical past, it has also had struggles in dealing with the pandemic, like everybody else. It would go on to be the most inoculated state, which has consistently delivered them quicker and better than any Western nation. With a nation that is now on its fourth inoculation, it has been a precursor for what we can expect to happen in the United States and Canada. And boy, things do not look good. So, to help us unpack this conversation today, we have a very special guest, Ury Weiss, a licensed mechanical engineer, freedom advocate, and Israeli army veteran who's going to be joining us from on the ground in Israel today. So without further ado, welcome to the Flow of Discourse. Hello everybody and welcome to the Flow of Discourse. My name is Brendan Kennedy. I am your host. So today I am very glad you are here to join us for this discussion. And to hear more of our discussions, please feel free to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. So today we have special guest Ury Weiss, who is joining us from Israel. Shalom.
Shalom, Brandon. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
You as well, sir. It's an absolute pleasure to come on here. So my cousin had referred you to come and speak with me on my show here, and it seems to me that you could fill many lifetimes with your experience, and that's the kind of discussions that I like to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, your cousin, and I, we go back a long time at the Pickering Nuclear. We worked there together, and we established a firm friendship. And I'm Jewish; he's a devout Christian.
Yeah.
And we got along. We had also our differences in his trying to to convert at times, but we established a wonderful relationship. And for me, it's about almost 6 years since I retired, and I don't work for the OPG, for Ontario Power Generation at Pickering.
Yeah.
And we still communicate via email and WhatsApp and other things.
That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to start this interview off by going back even further from that. Let's start from the beginning. Where are you from, and what are your background and credentials?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna be this year 72 years old. As I said, I retired from OPG, almost more than 6 years ago, at around 65. I was born in Romania, in an area called Moldavia or Moldova, right at the northern border of the Romanian Moldova with Ukraine. And I lived in Romania until I was about 11. Arrived in Israel in 1961, and probably later on will discuss about my experience, my childhood experience in Romania. But for the time being, I'll just give quick overview. Who am I and what I'm all about.
Yeah.
So my childhood was in Romania until 11. At 11, we left Romania, not for Israel, because at the time it was almost impossible to leave for Israel.
Yeah.
We left for France. So we left in February 61 for Paris, France.
Yeah.
We leave. My mother had over there two cousins. We stayed in Paris about 5 weeks, and at the time we debated whether my parents, of course, I was a kid, whether we should go to Canada or Brazil. There were a few agencies that helped Jews who escaped from the behind the Iron Curtain from Romania, from communist Romania, Bolshevik Romania.
Yeah.
And so there was the highest organization, the Jewish agency. My dad decided one day we are going to Israel. We want the kids to grow in a free society, in a Jewish society. So we arrived by boat. One night we took the train from Paris to Marseille. In 5 days we were at the port of Haifa, and that's the new life in Israel started around March 1961. In Israel, at the time, Israel was not the modern Israel of today. It was kind of the entire country was like a transit camp. The population was barely, now the population of Israel is 9.3 million. At the time, it was probably something like 1.5 million. A lot of the people lived in transit camps, like in asbesto outfits, sort of cabins. And since life over there was difficult, it was like cultural shock and also not knowing the language. Me and my brother, we went separate ways to boarding schools. So for 3 years until high school, I went to a boarding school in Jerusalem. This was Jerusalem before the Six-Day War. So
Okay.
it was the old Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And over there, it was really team building, feeling like Israelis. There were people that mostly some people that were orphans, people like me that situation at home was hard and there were hardship and so at least over there we had a regiment of work and we were well fed and this was really one of the most beautiful periods of my life and away from the parents, away from the tension of making a livelihood and so forth. So
That that's a
I was there about 3 years. Then went to high school, went back home in the Tel Aviv suburb high school.
yeah.
After high school, a week after high school, I was already in the army. I volunteered for the paratroopers. So 3 years I was with the paratroopers. And through action, it was from 1969 to 1972. So there were actions, there were battles, there were uh, the routine military grind.
Mm-hmm.
And in 72, I finished my 3 year compulsory service uh, as a sergeant. And I went to university. I went to study mechanical engineering at the Ben Gurion University in Beersheba. And I studied there for 4 years, became mechanical engineer, and then got married immediately following. It was like a marathon.
Yeah.
Following university, probably within a month, I was married. My first daughter, who is 45 today, was born in May 77, so she's going to be 45 in May this year. And later on, we had another daughter, who is also in Canada, Lee. She's going to be 40 in just a couple of weeks. at the end of January. So,
That's a
so in Israel, after university, I was about 6 years. In 1982, I came to Canada. So this will be an overview. I went in Canada. I worked in the first few years in automotive. At first, it was hard. I came in the midst of the recession of 1982.
oh man.
But as an engineer, and my English was high school English, quite sluggish, but I adapted and I found jobs. I worked mainly in automotive, in manufacturing of appliance components, and in February 1990, I started with Pickering Nuclear. I was hired on this project of post-Chernobyl review, and over there, I worked almost actually 25 years, 26 years almost until my retirement in 2015. So that's kind of an overview of who I am and where I'm coming from.
That's a absolutely incredible story, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there that I've said it before, but I'll say it again just because I'm amazed. Like some people don't even go through a fraction of that in their lifetime,
Yeah, yeah.
or even leave within 2 miles of where they're born. So that's an absolute incredible feat, and that's to be celebrated, I think. Um, so I did quite a bit of research on some of the topics that we're be talking about today, and so some of my questions are just kind of based off of observations I've had. Um, so you're back in Israel now, is that correct?
Correct. Correct. So my plan following retirement was to spend time in Israel, mainly in the winter, like to be a snowbird,
Yeah.
and to be in the summer with my kids and grandkids in Canada. And this worked until this pandemic started, because this is the first year. So I would say 2021 is the first year that I simply could not return to Canada. So it's a big setback for me because other than that, I was living my dream. My dream was to retire in Israel, but also Canada has been good to me. I raise my kids. I have all my everything I own is there, whether it's my saving, my family, my everything. But I definitely wanted to connect also with my childhood and with Israel. It's a wonderful place to be in the winter and the summer.
Yeah, I could
It
imagine.
used to be. It used to be, yeah, it used to be. The climate is amazing, and I was very happy to really, like I said, to live my dream, to be over there in the summer. The Canadian summers are wonderful. To spend time with my kids and grandkids, and to be here, in safety during the winter.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, these plans were interrupted last year because I couldn't return, and because I'm not sure that I would be able to come back, and so I decided to stay put. And I also didn't know whether there will be repercussions of me coming there. Going to we have rumors about internment camps and other stuff. So I hear stories which are unpleasant, and unfortunately, at the age of my retirement, it brings memories of my childhood, early childhood in Bolshevik Romania, because I can see the signs of totalitarianism, totalitarian regime,
Yes.
how it's being established step by step. It's not being established in one instance. It's established step by step, incremental progress towards dictatorship and totalitarianism and outright fascism. And I have to say that Canada is not unique because similar processes happen here. And although I was aware of this Agenda 21/2030 of the World Cabal and of the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum, I was certain in my bones that this thing will not apply to Israel. Israelis will never agree to something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Was I wrong? Was I wrong? I was very wrong. I was very wrong. Not only was I wrong, but it seems to me that this entire drive, this entire the main effort of this world pandemic, I would call it pandemic,
Yeah.
started here in Israel. And this is very sad, whether it's the terror being applied on Israelis, on ordinary citizens, outright fear, abuse. It's simply unbelievable. I could not imagine that a country that fought in wars, I went to wars, and
Yeah.
we lost our best people, we lost our best soldiers, the best fighter pilots, the best paratroopers, that this kind of people would hide now behind masks and would fear a virus that nobody succeeded isolating so far, right? But
Yeah.
basically, that is non-existent. So basically, they are fearing something, a phantom, which is not. It's very hard to reason with that. It's very hard to understand how people that I was connected with them for so many years can succumb to this kind of lies and deception and simply the work of the devil, I would say.
There's
So this is very disconcerting for me.
some of the things that
Yeah, go
I've
ahead.
kind of been seeing. So in Canada, especially, I don't know how much you've been following, but since our last election that we've had here, our prime minister has been driving really hard at the fear tactics, which I would say is one of the precursors that I would recognize for total totalitarianism, where they're creating a divide and an us against them type of thing. What type of markers would you say that are you seeing going around out there that uh, are hinting towards this type of leap, where we're going to get kind of out of democracy and into something a little bit more terrifying?
Yeah. Well, some of the markers are the deployment of the military. Israel is a country that no one ever questioned, like in the U.S. Methods, whether it's the methods of the Mossad or the methods of the intelligence services, the internal, what is the equivalent FBI in the U.S. Nobody questioned those capabilities that we gave to those special forces,
Mm-hmm.
like the Mossad agents, and nobody questions the morality, because we knew that at the end of the game they are meant to protect us. So when we see that the methods that were used to hunt terrorists, even to targeted assassinations, for example, of our enemies, and Israel became expert in pinpointing things like this.
Mm-hmm.
The person could be without a cell phone. They knew his whereabouts. They knew the window he was sleeping, and they could target a missile in his bedroom. So this kind of capability we accepted, that because we said, we are a small country with limited resources. We need innovation. We need to have a leading edge to fight with our enemies, with our surrounding enemies, with Iran, with the nuclear program in Iran, but also with our enemies from the north, from the south, and also from the east. So once I realized that the same methods are now being deployed against us, the citizens. So the prime minister says that now they can tell, for example, if we go to a demonstration, and I was on Saturday night on the demonstration at the house of the foreign minister in Tel Aviv,
Oh wow.
and they have drones. They have drones in the air, and they have face recognition. They can tell who was there. Okay, They can tell if you have your cell phone with you, then they know you are there. But maybe without the cell phone, they can also tell that who is there. They already arrested and assassinated quite a few of our leaders. So, for example, it was a person called Hai Shulian. He was arrested in Jerusalem. He was the one with the megaphone, you know, he was the one speaker with the megaphone. The police beat him. He was a healthy man, 50 something, not vaccinated, not injected, I shouldn't say vaccinated, but very strong. They beat him. They broke some of his bones. Eventually, he was hospitalized. Days later, he was dead. He broadcast a video from his bed that the doctor even told him that his last days are coming. So this is very scary. These are things that we can never imagine. I talk to more and more people that we are afraid to go and see a doctor. Here in Israel, the medicine used to be very advanced.
Yeah.
They have a system of healthcare that everyone has healthcare, but also HMO, and there is also private medicine. There is also this surveillance, not surveillance, now it's surveillance, but used to be a national database of healthcare. So basically, if you go to your file in your HMO, you can see everything. There is no here in Israel medical files on paper. So all the medical files are computerized. You can see them when you go to a hospital. They don't need to. They know your blood. They know everything about you. They know your cardiograms if you had 5 years ago. Everything is on the computer. You don't need to bring any file. You move. There is nothing like you move to a new doctor. You have to bring your file. There
Yeah.
is nothing like that. Everything is online, and it has been like this for the last 15, close to 20 years. Over 15 years, it has been like this. So it's more advanced. Now they are using these things in to surveillance over us. So basically, they know who is who is vaccinated, who is not. They can do surveillance over where you were, whether you pose a risk, whether they want to quarantine. So they are using some of the methods that they used against our enemies on us, the citizens, and they take pride. And I feel that there is also the start with this green passport. There is also the start of a social credit system, like the one that is being established in China, that is already working in China, but much more sophisticated in Israel than in China.
So
Much more
I want there's
sophisticated.
a before we get too far, there's a point or two I'd like to touch on. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, yeah.
So it, what you said in regards to, like, I have a chill going down my spine right now with what you said in regards to things that were put in place to combat the enemies of Israel. That reminds me a lot of the United States and Canada, where when the United States implemented the Patriot Act to fight terrorism, and we all thought that was an amazing thing, but it feels like at this point that they took things under the Patriot Act and they turned it on its own citizens entirely. So Israel is not
Exactly.
alone there. That is something that is happening everywhere. As far as social credit is concerned, I think in the West it's already here. Um, it is something that goes under the guise of what's the word? CGIs or something. It's a social governance score, is what we call it. So the
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like they classify people by people that would do good deeds in like from the point of view of the government, good deeds. Like if you are obedient, and of course the bad guys like me and maybe like you, that we are not obedient, that we question, we value our freedom, and we can identify those processes that bring us to total fascism, the way it was in Romania. And I
Yes.
can't help but seeing the parallel. It's almost a circle. I was born into this, and now that I am at the end of at the winding up of my life, I return to it returns me to this horror of horrors of my childhood. And the police here got permission to break into home without warrants. They did. And everything under the emergency of a virus, under the disguise to protect us. Under the disguise of a virus, nobody succeeded to isolate. Under this disguise, they want to break into our homes without warrant, search everything they want, take you whenever they want, and this is simply appalling. And it's happening. It's happening. They target our leaders, the ones with the megaphones. I mean, I'm not one of those. I'm already. I never planned it in my 70s. I
No.
will climb the barricades. But another marker that you can see, even the terminology. You know, when you look at the French Revolution, they had this committee for public safety. All the reign of the Robespierre or the Jacobins, you know, those terror that was applied on the French people was under the disguise of the Committee for Public Safety. This was really the and here everything is the same thing. Now they have laws that bypass parliament. They don't need to do laws in parliament. In the prime minister office, he has a very limited number of ministers. So it's a kind of a mini cabinet, kind of a committee for public safety. Their meetings are classified for 30, 40 years. We don't know when the meetings take place. And over there, they can discuss anything. And from there come all the decrees that don't have to go even through parliament. And also the campaign of fear. So the campaign that is created against us, the ones that, the freedom fighters, that we don't want to accept those poison shots, are very similar to what Nazi Germany did to the Jews. It's very similar. Let's not forget that the Shoah, the Holocaust, didn't start in 1933. In 1933 started the cancellation, the incitement against Jews, the lies that Jews carry diseases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for 7 years, they pumped these lies into the German population that when the Holocaust arrived, when it was time, when the war, World War II arrived, like in 39, the Holocaust just happened. I mean, there was no need to train forces. It was already, the German people already had in their subconscious, the Jews are not a force for good. The Jews are disease carriers. Okay, that it's better without them. So they even found moral justification. The same like our ministers, they say, they incite now the public against us. They say that we are disease carriers. We are healthy people, but they call us disease carriers. We have blood on our hands because we refuse to vaccinate. So it's very similar. The markers that you ask for, they are very similar today in Israel or in Canada. Trudeau in Canada express himself with similar wording.
Yes.
And it's very similar to what the Nazis did from 1933 to 1939. So basically, they had 6-7 years to incite, to indoctrinate the public, to create this mass formation psychosis, and also to frighten the German population from the Jews. The Jews are dangerous. You cannot intermarry. You can sit on the same bench with a Jew. Today, the same thing. You have to shop on different times, right? So I can see similar markers today in Israel, maybe in Canada, maybe to the less extent in Canada, but what happened?
I've seen what you're talking about in some form, shape, or another here in Canada. And it's kind of funny that what you said about politicians demonizing people. Justin Trudeau went on a French talk show recently, and he said people who don't want the shot are homophobic, misogynistic, and racist. Which I couldn't help but laugh that Mr. Blackface himself is calling people racist. So that's kind of it was in poor taste on his part. I want to scale back a little bit. And so you had served in the Israeli army. You had hinted earlier that you had left your 3 year service as a sergeant from the paratroopers. Paint us a picture of what that was like at the time. Is I know in the 70s there's been quite a bit of conflict in Israel.
Well, I enrolled in the army 1 week after high school. In Israeli high school, we had this baccalaureate exams that are not national exams. In Canada, I don't think there are, but national exams, they come from the government. So 1 week after, I was already enrolled in the army, and I was past 18. I was 18 and a half. So normally they enroll at 18, but if you have to finish high school, then... And I volunteered for the paratroopers. I was, the Israel at the time was a country of volunteerism. Everyone said, if I won't do it, nobody else will do it. And if I was capable, I was a good athlete, I was in good shape. And I thought, and the paratroopers were also at the time the special forces. So throughout the wars, paratroopers 2 years earlier, they liberated Jerusalem. There were hard battles over Jerusalem, in trenches, in even in hand-to-hand combat. And those were everyone aspired to be, paratrooper or a fighter pilot or to go to the Navy SEALs. I'm not such a good swimmer, so I said I'll jump from planes. And so it was. So how it was for the paratroopers, we had 1 week of testing. So this testing of 1 week was interviews, but also field things. We had to do things in the field. It was the initial recruitment base. It was interviews with senior officer, but also with psychologists. Why do you want to do that? How do you think you're going to handle yourself in battle? By the time, I would say that by the time every soldier in Israel at 18 goes to the army, but the initial selection for the army and starts at 16. So at 16, people go for medical tests. So basically, they check medical if you're fit, and they assign a certain profile to. If you are fit, if you are not fit, they try to determine in what domain you would be fit in the army.
Yeah.
Later on, there are another two interviews at 17 and even after. They check your intellect. They establish a profile. They know exactly who you are. You have to go through some exam. They know by the time you get to be 18. Whoever has to go to the fighter pilots, they are being selected. You can also volunteer, but they are being encouraged. They know exactly. They probably know you better than you know yourself by the time you are 18. So they know if you are fit to be in combat or you are fit to be technical, because in the army you have combat units and you have also technical units, especially in the Israeli army. There are a lot of technical units.
Yeah.
So for me, I finished high school and I volunteered to the paratrooper. I went through this testing, and I was ecstatic when I was accepted. So basically, we were at the time more than 1,000 people, and we started in the August of 1969. We started about 140, and later on, quite a few dropped. But that's how it was. So in the paratroopers, it's a volunteer, it's special forces. It is not every, it's a special path that is a special training program that the paratroopers have of 14 months, initial 14 months, which include initial training and then combat training and all kinds of specialties. And after 14 months, the last 3 months are every paratrooper goes to this commander's course, like a junior commander course
Okay.
for a class. Yeah, but everyone goes. And then after that, I went to become a specialist. Only after 14 months, I went to become a specialist within the paratroopers. So I went to do two courses, which I specialized, like 2 months. I became explosive expert. So I dealt with explosives. It's military style explosives. So this is what I did the rest of my time in the army. I was doing explosives if I had to install, dismantle mines and booby trap things. This is the kind of things that I had to do. And in the army, we work only with TNT. We don't do things like police. Of course, today is more advanced with the automation, with the cell phone. At the time, everything was analog. Everything we had to wire, and every detonation that you had to prepare with material with your hands. And
Yes.
today the controls are different. But I finished the army. I enrolled in the university, and once I finished the army, I moved in another thing in the army. In the army, I saw also some action because there were always trouble in Gaza. There were trouble at the time in Jordan, in the Jordan Valley. So we participated in a lot of combat in ambushes that we had to do. And I was also at the Suez Canal in May 70. May 70 was hell on earth. It was bombardments, and so I saw quite a lot of action in these 3 years. By the real war, I was already in reserve. I finished my army in 72.
Yeah.
In October 73 started the Yom Kippur War. I was already one of the most youngest in the reserve paratrooper brigade. So over there were others who were much older that participated in the 6-Day War and even previous campaigns. So it was something brand new. So in this first year of university, I went 3 times for duty reserve. I went for a jump. I went for part of you have to jump periodically.
Yeah.
The last time was the war that started in October. So this was quite an experience.
Is that the Yom Kippur War?
Yeah, the Yom Kippur War. Yeah, we were caught by surprise. This war was brutal, something there's no Israeli experience before. From my battalion in the regular duty, most of the battalion was decimated. Most of my friends over there were killed. They were all killed, and it was really depressing, demoralizing, because when I heard what happened to this battalion, they were just ahead of us, and there was a battle that decimated most of the battalion. It was a depressing feeling, but it was war, and we had to push on. And so
Yes.
with my battalion in reserve, we crossed the Suez Canal. The Egyptian came, they invaded. The Suez Canal goes south to north, okay? So the Egyptian attacked us on October 6th, 1973. And they broke they attacked the entire Bar-Lev line, which used to be Bar-Lev fortifications, and they attacked with all their forces, the 3 armies of the Egypt army. We had only a few hundred people over there. Most of them were killed. Some of them were taken hostages, prisoners of war. And there was no force to stop them over there. They could have advanced even further, but they were afraid that they didn't have a very low. When you advance, you have to advance also your supplies. You cannot leave the soldier there without food and stuff like that. Everything has to advance. And they were not experienced. But in the first few days, until we mobilized the reserves, they could have advanced 50, 60 kilometers, not 20. But they stopped at 20 kilometers. And when we started reorganizing the tanks, the paratrooper reserves, and it was hard. But if you remember, we had a general named Arik Sharon.
Yeah.
Later, he was the prime minister of Israel. This guy had, big balls, and he had really big balls, because when you can imagine that the entire Egyptian army is south to north along the entire Suez Canal in the Sinai Desert, right, in our area. He decided, we are going to establish one bridge, we are going to break through it, and we are going into their hearts. We are going into Egypt. They are in our place, we are going into theirs, and we are going to encircle them. And this what happened. It was something so crazy that I simply don't know what. So they had maybe 30 bridges. The Egyptians had 30 bridges across the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
We established one bridge, and we had to guard it with. So some paratroopers from the paratrooper brigade, they established the bridge. It's called the people that go and with those speedboats, with rubber boats, and establish the base on the other side. And then the forces of the engineering corps, we laid out one bridge, like this floating bridge. The tanks would go through it. And so the bridge was established by those better people, and they lost quite but the bridge was established. Some tanks started going in. Some of them went north towards Ismailia. Some of them went south towards the city of Suez. And I joined probably a couple of days later. We crossed already the bridge, and we crossed and we moved north towards Ismailia.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk a lot about that more, because there were a lot of battles over there. There were a lot of casualties. I was wounded on October 21st. It was a night battle over there, and there were another 6 people wounded along with me. It was tough to bring us back to our area, because the entire place was bombarded, and I was wounded in the shoulder, and it was painful. I had the bullets fractured the bone of the, and it was quite painful. But once I got to the field hospital on our side, I got morphine, and I fell asleep, and I woke up in Jerusalem, the hospital, and this is
Oh,
what
wow.
told me the war ended. So yeah, that's about war, and I hope we don't talk about war anymore.
No, that's fine. I do appreciate what you have shared. And so definitely thank you for that. I will say this, that it's absolutely incredible that such a tiny state in the Middle East, which not only against Egypt, but Saudi Arabia, Algeria, Jordan, Iraq, Libya, Kuwait, Tunisia, Morocco, I guess some Cubans were there too, and Sudanese.
Yeah.
So, I mean, such a tiny state against all of that. I was going to ask you what you thought about. So there's a lot of media bias and a lot of haters. A lot of people don't like Israel. Many of them don't even believe that Israel should exist as a nation state. What do you say to that? And what would your counter argument to make people understand otherwise? For example, I'll tell you this, Ury. Last year, when Hamas was firing rockets in May of 2021, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, a news outlet here, they did a massive story on all the protests that Palestinian supporters were doing. They made this big article that said thousands of people come out and protest of this, and nowhere do they mention anything about lockdown precautions or anything like that. And hardly do they give the Jerusalem or the Jerusalem side of the story in the article. It's kind of like a bias without saying, and then they're also endorsing this type of protest. But if you're going to do lockdown protests, and you're a bad guy, you have to do what we say is good, and if you do what you think is good, well then you're a bad guy.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say about that? What would you be able to say to make people understand otherwise that
Yeah.
Israel
Well,
does have?
I understand. Throughout my life in Canada, and Jim, your cousin, he could attest to it, because I put all my energy into being a goodwill ambassador for Israel. Whether it was at work, of course, we don't do politics at work, but whenever we were at lunch, I tried to explain the peculiar situation Israel and the Israelis are in. Since its inception, Israel is a country under siege. Now, the argument goes before Israel inception, and today, even I, in the last 2 years, even I get maybe different point of view, different overview of what happened there. So what happened? What people have to understand is that this land became barren. After all the conquests that were there, the land became barren. There was destruction. There were some since the Crusades, for example. So there were people coming to this place during the Crusades. Okay, so the Muslims established over there their sovereignty over the Christian holy sites. So there was movement in this area, but nobody had interest to develop the land. The land, by our biblical testimonies, is the land of milk and honey. Well, whoever arrived in Israel, when I arrived in Israel, there was no milk and no honey. Everything was barren. So nobody really had. Even the devout Christians, they moved the religious Christian places. There was something they knew, that from Jerusalem, from the Via Dolorosa, from the Church of the Sepulchre, from there everything started. This is the story of Jesus. This is where Jesus walked on water. But they tried to bring the Holy Land maybe to Rome, to the Vatican, to other places. And Israel became neglected. And it was only when the Jews started coming back. First, I have to say that there was always a Jewish seed left in Israel. There was places like Tzfat, Safed, in the north. In the old Jerusalem, there were always some people that stayed to keep the tradition, to keep the places, in Gush Etzion over there, in Hebron, where our patriarchs are buried, Abraham and the entire all the patriarchs. Abraham, Yitzhak, Jacob, and so there was always a presence. It started more with the Zionist movement in the 1800s, and I think it started as a secular movement. It didn't start as a religious. Israel was always for the Jews throughout these 2,000 years of diaspora. Every year at Passover, next year in Jerusalem. So this is the aspiration of the Jews. But this became just something from the prayer. People started translating. Even the Jews, they had the Reform movement. And the Reform movement was very detrimental to the Jews, because the Reform movement was born in Germany by German Jews. And they wanted the emancipation. They want to be like the Germans. And how to be like the Germans, but to create a new religion. So, what are the pillars of the Jewish religion? The pillars of the Jewish religion are Zion, Jerusalem, and Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. These are the three pillars. There are other things, but you cannot imagine Judaism. Well, of course, the 12 tribes, but this is the Eretz Israel, the 12 tribes, the land of Judea, the land of Simeon, uh, but these are the 12 tribes. The Reform took out of their Siddur, out of their prayer books, any reference to Judaism, any reference to Israel, to Zion. So basically, they say we're going to do a new religion, a universal religion, and by doing that, we will be liked by the goyim. They say by the Gentiles. Will be liked because they don't like those people with the pairs, with those curls and their funny dresses and stuff like that. We're gonna be like them, and we're going to pray like them. So they adopted from the Christian church, the organ and other things. And this is where it started, but it didn't end there. They really wanted to change Judaism, but in Judaism there is this solid, the Haredim, the Haredim, the devout. The same like you have the devout evangelical in Christianity, we
Yes.
have our devout. And today, at one point, I was maybe critical of them, but today I say these people are keeping the flame going. Okay,
Hmm.
if it wasn't for them, then maybe we wouldn't have Judaism and Israel today.
Yeah, that's
So yeah, this brings also to the story of the Hanukkah. Nobody talks about Hanukkah, but during Hanukkah there was the big revolt against the Antiochians, right? And who revolted were the Maccabees. Today everyone celebrates Hanukkah, but those Maccabees, those Judah Maccabee, and the Hashmonaim, the entire family, those were the so-called radicals that today they vilify. They say, gee, these are people are radical. These are the people, few people, the majority of the people were with Antiochian. They were with the Greeks, they were with the Romans.
that's
So this,
the Maccabees. Is that correct? And that's what you're talking about is the story of Hanukkah, where the oil lasted in the lantern for 7 days.
correct, correct, correct.
Yes.
Those are the Maccabees, the Judah Maccabee, the hammer. So these guys were not many. They were not many, but they had this drive, and they were willing to sacrifice themselves, and they were willing to fight. And eventually, they kicked the Greeks from Jerusalem during the story of Hanukkah. Eventually, later on, the temple was destroyed by Vespasian and then Trajanus, um, and then they started the big diaspora.
Hmm.
These are the things. So what is, but I digress a little bit. So back to this what happening with Israel. So the Judaism was dormant for we went through all this Inquisition in Spain. So they were chasing us from everywhere. Jews were forbidden to be farmers. So they had to go into banking. They had to go into what was available to them. They had to live in ghettos. There was a ghetto in Venice. There was in old Venice. I recommend everyone goes and visit the old ghetto in Venice. So these are hundreds of years. Jews were in Spain and they were kicked out. So they were used by those monarchs they were good in finances. They used to borrow their money, and when they couldn't return, they kicked them out. So that's how Jews migrated from Spain to maybe North Africa, then to Holland, to Italy, and to Ashkenaz, to Romania and Poland and Germany and so forth. Now, what happened what was the lightning rod for the creation of Zionists? It was a secular. So all this preface was to say that initially the entire drive was religious, but the Zionists were not religious. The Zionists they were the Zionism was created by Theodor Herzl. He was a secular Jew. In fact, many say that he wasn't a Jew anymore. He was already uh, his family wasn't Jewish. Maybe some people say that he was Jew only by birth, right?
Yeah.
But he was not practicing. But he was a Austrian journalist, and he went to France to cover the Dreyfus trial. Dreyfus was a Jewish officer in the French army, and he was framed for something he didn't do, and he was accused of treason, and they wanted to hang him even. So Theodor Herzl went there and to cover the story. And when he started analyzing the facts, okay, and the entire French people started analyzing the facts, it seemed to him, it became clear to him that this is a story of the framing was because of anti-Semitism, because the guy was entirely innocent. Even the guy that was supposedly the traitor was left alone. He was one of the related to over there to the French courts, and so when it became clear to him that Dreyfus was framed, he became horrified. You know, there was maybe this naivety that he became a German and like an Austrian, Germanic. Uh, he left his Judaism behind, but all of a sudden he realized this fallacy that he didn't leave anything behind. In fact, Dreyfus was a Jew exactly like he was. Dreyfus maybe didn't know that he was a Jew, but someone knew that he was born a Jew. Okay, Alfred Dreyfus, right? So Dreyfus was a Jew as much as Theodor Herzl was a Jew. So if in a way, in a Machiavellian way, you know, this Dreyfus trial in France, where Theodor Herzl went to cover, not only return Dreyfus to Judaism, because all of a sudden he said, "Wow, who am I? Am I French?" He thought that he was French. All of a sudden he realized he is not really French, and there were only a few. There was this Albert Camus and Dumas. They wrote J'accuse, I accuse. They realized also that the entire French intelligentsia, the French elite, understood, and they were also horrified. And from the Dreyfus trial, even the French legal system took tens of years. Even some say that even today they cannot overcome the fact, because the French they have this thing that fraternité, égalité, and rule of law,
Yes.
and that it affected the French for many years. And Theodor Herzl, when he returned to Vienna, he separated from his family, and he was only in his 30s, he dedicated his life to create the Zionist movement. And again, the religious people didn't even want to see him, didn't want to see him. He lived only 5 years later. He died in 1903. He died at 44 or 45. But in these 5 years, he created the Judaism. The first Congress was in Basel, over there in
Yes.
Switzerland. And and from there on, this is the story of Judaism. With the onset of Judaism, Jews started returning. Now the land was barren. Once the Jews return, Jews, they have this quality that they can create a barren land and make it flowers. They can grow
Yes.
flowers. Even you come to Israel and you see the desert blooms. The desert really, you go to the Negev, it's desert. You have flowers. And in Gaza, they grew, the settlers over there in Gaza, the flowers that they were exporting throughout Europe, they were created by settlers in Gaza. Only by ingenuity and by this kind of by ingenuity, innovation.
Yes.
So this is really the Jews started returning. They needed manpower. Well, the Arabs from the neighboring countries, started coming there. There were jobs. So there were the Baron Rothschild, who financed at the time he financed the entire enterprise in the this called settlement in Israel. So of course he also preferred to employ Arabs with cheaper labor and stuff like that. So Arabs came and settled. This is how it happened. Is the fallacy that the Arabs were here all along? It's really not so true. But eventually there was a settlements of Arab villages. They got settled. They came for work, and eventually they got settled. So this started in about 1800 or so. So Jews came in smaller number because we are less people. Jews also don't are not so much familiar. The most Jews that came from Europe couldn't handle life over there. So whoever came, they simply left. But there were quite a few settlements that stayed and thrived and prospered, and they needed labor. So this is really how the conflict started. It's a shame that it started, and I think that in if you know if the Israelis and the Israelis probably you can say that are like the Canadians, but our Arab neighbors they're not. They do have a supremacy thing that they can work, but if they live in a community, they have to feel supreme, and that's why they established their mosque and they established their and one of the things that in my mind it was a threat to their way of life. Their way of life, their family is very patriarchal. So you have the father. Sometimes, if he is wealthy, he has a few women, but he has the family, and the girls they have to be obedient. They can marry only. They can be sold into marriage. Okay, well, they look at the Jews. The Jews came secular Jews. The girls they had, short pants.
Yeah.
They were entirely liberated. They were entirely secular. They were living with the boys. They were having most of the kibbutzim. They were, families that it was a very loose thing of family. The children that were born over there, they were raised, in a family. Like crooked Hillary Clinton was saying, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. But it's true. The early settlements were the kibbutzim, and it worked because they were all of the same mindset. They had something that was survival. Each one has to put his share in this endeavor. A kibbutz like this or a settlement like this,
Yeah.
will not work if you have people that are slackers. Okay, if you have it's enough one slacker, they will kick him out. So people that are if a person come over there, he wants to be an artist. Okay, be an artist, but do your work only throughout the day. Put your put your work throughout the day. So artistry is not something of survival. Later on, maybe they could accommodate, but not at the time. So the initial conflict in my mind was started because the Arabs saw a direct threat to their way of life. They were afraid. All of a sudden, the daughter will come home. She would say, "I don't want to marry Muhammad because he is rich. I want to marry someone that I fall in love with." So I think that this is the root of the problem. Very few want to tackle that because it's a sensitive issue, of course, because it shows the cultural war. So I think this is because otherwise, on a personal level, I had Arab friends. I still have Arab friends. Mind you, there are many Arabs here that are in the Likud, and
Yes.
they are very Zionist.
So I would actually
Yeah.
say I believe that in your court system you also have people of the Muslim faith. and that
Oh
sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
And
Supreme Court, yeah.
that's the funny thing, right? Like that would never be in reverse. That would only be just that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Not only that, but the Arabs have a lot of the Arabs of Israel. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have lots of rights that we don't have. For example, well, rights, the right, because they take the rights and nobody wants to question them. Nobody wants to create. And one of the reasons, the way I see it, is that the orders that the leaders of Israel are getting are not from the people, not from me and many other Israelis.
Yeah.
They get their leaders from the World Economic Forum and from the World Bank. This is where they get their orders, and it's becoming visible in the last 2 years. So, for example, in order to establish this government, they give now um, uh, many settlements, homes that were built without permits.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, they hook them up to electricity, water, permit, not permit, doesn't matter, but only for Arabs. For the Jews, it's not. It can't happen. I'll tell you another thing that is happening today with Arabs. Arabs, for example, I wanted to get hydroxychloroquine, HCQ,
Mm-hmm.
hydroxychloroquine, the Zelenko protocol. Well, they have in Israel the Zelenko protocol, but you have to get it on the black market from doctors that give prescription. And then you go to a special pharmacy that keeps these things. There are pharmacies that keeps these things. Well, I found out so I obtained it. I had to do a doctor consultation, private doctor, not through the. This doctor sent me the transcript, the prescription. I went and I bought this hydroxychloroquine and everything I needed for the Zelenko protocol in case I got sick, and I got sick, and it helped me.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it works like a charm. I'll discuss it later, but it works like a charm. But anyway, the story that I want to take is that I went to a pharmacy here in Petah Tikva, right? And I had to have a written prescription. Well, I was in Haifa a while ago, and I talked to a friend. I went to visit a friend in Haifa. Well, in Haifa, there are a lot of Arabs. Well, there is a Muhammad pharmacy over there, an Arab pharmacy.
Yeah.
He said, I went to Muhammad pharmacy and I got the hydroxychloroquine without prescription. So basically, the Arab pharmacies are not being audited. So basically, it's kind of a country within a country. They are not being audited, and he is not afraid. Like the Jewish pharmacy, he is afraid. He will not dispense anything without a prescription, whatever it is prescription. But the Arab doesn't have any issue. He said, just
So
pay and take whatever you want. So
so
this is, but
there.
but back to your question about it is unfair. It is unfair, but I believe that our Jewish leader here also had something to do with that, because I think that all the NGOs that were operating in Israel, I always ask myself, since I arrived here, how in the world Canada will never allow an NGO that comes and works against the state of Canada, against Canada,
Yeah.
to work in Canada. They will not get grants. They will not get offices. They will not get even revenue grants. Like. And here I could not understand it. Those NGOs that are hostile to Israel, they are being established here, and the government is doing. Even the Likud was doing nothing to prevent. There were infiltrators from Eritrea that came. They devastated entire neighborhoods in South Tel Aviv. The Supreme Court definitely is a corrupt Supreme Court. They get their marching orders from Davos, from the World Economic Forum. They don't do anything. They couldn't. These people were devastating entire neighborhoods, and the army was sending soldiers, female soldiers, to educate the kids and to take care of the kids instead of sending them out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, So it was kind of things. It was peculiar to see why they don't enforce the rule of law towards people like this. And to me, today, it's clear to me that this thing came from the World Economic Forum, from the United Nations. And right now, I would not have told you this stuff 2 years ago. But today, the way I see it is the same like Trudeau is a traitor to Canada. Our leaders are traitors to our people. They are traitors to our people. And I would not have said it 2 years ago. And I don't say it easily. I say it with heavy heart, but I could not help but reach this conclusion when I see that they can apply terrorism and barbarism towards the Jewish population and be so lenient with not only with the Arab population, very lenient with the Arab population, but also with the infiltrators. The same like happening in Canada, the same like it happens under the Democrats in the USA, that the border is wide open. They come, they give them money, they give them hotels, they give them everything.
Yes.
And I can't understand it. I can't understand, especially when entire neighborhoods in South Tel Aviv, which is the poor area of Tel Aviv, have been devastated.
Yeah.
So this is really what happened. I think that this Israel apartheid week and all this stuff, there was never apartheid in Israel. If there is apartheid in Israel, it's towards us, it's towards me. I cannot go in places. I don't have the green pass. So there is apartheid against me, but not against Arabs. Arabs can go anywhere and everywhere. I cannot go in many places where they can go. So this is really what I have to say to them. It's this thing was orchestrated by agencies, by bodies that are hostile to Jews. But today I think that there is some collusion of our governments with these bodies. And I don't know. It's very sad to say that, but this is not only me. This is the conclusion that I reached, and many of my friends in this freedom movement we reached. That our leaders, the same like Trudeau is a traitor to Canada, our leaders are a traitors to our people.
That's I could certainly see where you're coming from. I definitely yearn for things to come back, at least in Canada. I know Israel has always kind of been that way a little bit, to ensure that the Arab citizens are more or less behaving to some degree. And you know, all of the one of the key factors I find most of the ways that they pass these legislations and make these things happen, it is almost always done with some kind of emotional draw or something that is used to trigger an empathetic response, like, oh, my poor Palestinians, which of course, I mean, nobody wants to see any neighborhoods devastated at all. But it's when the media and government take things that are supposed to make you feel afraid or to make you feel just about anything. Everybody should absolutely be on guard for that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm always concerned, is when something is trying to draw some kind of heavy emotional response. And that's what I've been warning people about, is that everything here that has been happening all around the world, and to my surprise here today, like the way things are in Israel right now, it's really not that much different here.
Yeah.
It's like a couple of degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Is really all it is.
They get their marching orders. Trudeau and our leaders get their marching orders from the same masters. That's the problem. That's the issue. That's
yes. So in Israel, have they had do they have a vax pass there?
Oh yeah. They have a this green pass. Yeah, green pass.
Okay.
We can't go. I can't go into shopping centers and stuff like that. I simply can't go. But I can take the train. I can take the bus, and I can go to shop for groceries. So that's important. But yeah, everything else, restaurants, and I have to say that there are places that they don't enforce it. They simply don't enforce it, even in Tel Aviv, and I am amazed. Indoors, you have to wear those face diapers, and that's what it is. I want to say something about the last war, the last the last campaign. I was right here quite a few months ago, so there were bombardments from Gaza, and quite a few fell here, very close.
In May
And
of last year, is that correct?
yeah. So some of them fell quite here, and I in my house, in the modern homes, they have now. There is a room. One room is called mamad, which is built out of concrete. So
Yeah.
basically, only a direct feed will. But it's special ventilation and special windows. Basically, it's a hermetic room. It's a protection. It's a shelter within your home. So basically, if you get the missile on the balcony, and even the door is nothing will penetrate there. Nothing will go there. So well, my apartment is it's old, and so it's not. It doesn't have this thing. Some people go into the staircase.
Yes.
So I decided when I was home, and when I was also away, and I where there was a room like this. So of course I went to took shelter. But I simply sat and read, and I didn't bother, and that's it.
So you got
So
you got bombs going off in your neighborhood, and you're sitting in your safe room.
I read in my chair, and I watch. I could see on the cell phone that well, and I hear the siren. We can hear the siren because when the missile approaches, then you can hear the entire country can hear. Well, no, not only in the area where it approaches, but if it comes into the Tel Aviv area, so the entire Tel Aviv area is. And then they fire the Iron Dome, and you have explosions. We could hear the explosion falling and
Oh.
stuff like that. I didn't bother. But what I want to say that it was ever the first time that not only me but many people thought that this was our provocation. If you can believe that, it's unbelievable. I never imagined that in Israel, when Hamas starts bombarding from Gaza, that people will rationalize that it was our government that provoked this in order to I even don't know for what, to maybe take our mind off this thing, maybe try to unite us, try to remove because there is some resistance here too to all these draconian measures. So this is the. But I was amazed to see this trend in Israel that people started thinking, gee, this government, the previous government and this government, they don't have our interests at heart. And our Ministry of Health absolutely don't have our interests at heart. I would say I'm saying it with great pain and even agony. But I do everything. I get this Zelenko protocol. I do everything if I get sick, and I got sick,
Yeah.
to get well at home, not to go to a hospital or to any clinic, because these people are not my benefactors. Let's put it this way.
I I I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. I do have high hopes for the future. I do keep telling people to never give up, to stand by your convictions and what you believe in.
Yeah,
Start no shit and cause no harm, for lack of a better term.
exactly.
Like we some things are going to have to happen soon here to pull together, and I do hope that we can. So let's just hope that 2022 is going to have some interesting things happening, and that things are going to be different. I do think at this point we should go into closing remarks. We have gone about 19 minutes over, but I think that our conversations today were absolutely phenomenal, and I cannot once again thank you enough for coming on the show to talk about these things. So in closing remarks, is
It was a pleasure talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to say here before
Yeah,
we do a wrap up?
I'd like to say something in conclusion that I have a special well, I don't know if to call it a privilege, but to some extent it is a privilege that where I'm coming from. So you are amazed by my journey from being born. Even in Romania, we migrated, we moved to place. You see people that live their entire life in one place, and I moved from place to place, and I was exposed to so many cultures and to so many people and to so many experiences. So I would say again what I said before. This time now brings me back horror memories from my childhood. So horror memory. Freedom of speech is being suspended, basically suspended. People have to watch what they say. We are being censored, right? The fake news. In Romania, there was my mother as a children, we had to go outside, me and my brother, to be on the lookout because the police could go in the house. And the first thing they would do, they would look at the dial on the radio. If my mother listened to Free Europe, she was putting, the radio was like half a room. She was putting the ear to listen to Free Europe, to listen to news from freedom. And today, people accept so willingly the fake news of the media without questioning, and this is quite painful for me to see. And also, I have a warning to everyone. I know what fascism, Bolshevism is the same thing. The Bolsheviks and the fascists, they use the same methodologies, okay, the same methods of terror and totalitarianism. And I can see these things coming back to Canada, into Israel, into the USA, and everywhere where people are not on guard. And we must be on guard. We must stand on, we must stand on guard for thee, because we cannot leave to our children and grandchildren something that is reminiscent of Bolshevik Romania or Bolshevik Soviet Union. We inherited wonderful tradition. We had the Magna Carta in England, and from there we had only progression towards freedom and emancipation and fulfillment, and to see all these things erode one by one is painful, and I cannot scream loud enough this message. Stand up for your freedom. Stand up for your freedom. It's not, freedom is not free. Okay? Mm-hmm. Freedom is not a fault. Freedom you have to fight for. You have to fight and even sacrifice. You cannot allow despots like Trudeau and others to establish this reign of terror and barbarism, because because it will be very hard. It will be very hard to make this journey back. That's it.
That's amazing. No,
thanks again for hosting me. It was a privilege for me.
For me as well, sir. And that's a very heartfelt message. And I will always be in pursuit of truth and freedom. And once again, thank you everybody for listening to The Flow of Discourse. If you want to check us out, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and Spotify. So do check those things out. But in the meantime, Stay safe out there.